Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Willis Jasper Slav, and today we'll be looking at employment law as a course. So this is a very important course for those people doing human resource management, because you cannot practice your human resource management knowing the laws of employment. So those who are in level 3, employment law, it's one of the mother courses like in there. So the first topic in employment law is contract of employment. So there are 4 things which you need to know under this topic. How to define a contract, what are the forms of contract, the types of contract, and the test used to distinguish those types of contract. So contract of employment is defined as a legal binding agreement between an employer and an employee which outlines the terms and conditions of employment. A legal binding agreement between an employer and an employee which outlines the terms and conditions of employment. That's how we define contract of employment. There are 2 forms of contract: express and implied. Under express, we've got oral and written. So you can either express your contract through written or verbally. Implied. This is a type of contract which is formed due to one's behavior. Your actions can make you enter into a contract without saying anything, just your actions. And then the types of contract, we've got 2 types: contract for service and contract of service. Contract for service and contract of service. So contract for service, this is a legal binding agreement between an employer and an independent contractor. That's contract for service. Contract for service, it governs the relationship between an employer and an independent contractor. So basically, the contract for service, you find like it's like to be formed like where, okay, I'll give an example about Evelyn College. When they want to construct like the ablution blocks that side, they will engage in like let's say ZNS to come and do that project. That means they'll be forming what? A contract for service, because they're involving an independent contractor to come and do that job. Those people are not part of the organization, but they will come in just to construct that thing. So meaning that's a contract for service. And then the contract of service. Contract of service is the other name for contract of employment is contract of service. Get me right. The other name for contract of employment is contract of service, because it's a legally binding agreement which governs the relationship between an employer and an employee. So in order for a contract of employment to exist, there has to be 2 parties, employer and employee. While for the contract for service requires an employer and an independent contractor. So the last part under this topic is the test used to distinguish these 2 topics which I've mentioned, of these 2 types of contracts which I've mentioned. How can you differentiate it? How can you draw a line to show that this is a contract for service and this is a contract of service without being told? So there are three common tests which we use. We've got integration test, economical test, and integration, economical, and the first one is and control test. Yeah. So control test, economic test, and the integration test. So control test. So this test seeks to establish or to determine or to identify who has got more control over that work by asking such questions like how, when, what, and where. Control test seeks to establish or to determine or to identify who has more control over that work. If your boss, if the employer tells you when to report for work, how to do the work, which process to use, that shows it's a contracting of service, meaning the employer has got more control over that work. If you as a worker, you control your, like, you report at your own time, you do what you want, and the employer is just concentrating on is just waiting for the final result, that shows contract of what? Contracting for service, because the employer, their main focus is the final work, not what you are doing today. No, they are more concentrating on the final work. Economical test. Economical test seeks to determine whether the worker is economically dependent on an employee for survival. Because basically you find like when you're working for a certain company, you're not going to have any other source of income, meaning you are economically dependent on that company. That shows the contract of service, meaning you are depending on them economically. But when you are an independent contractor, you find like you've got 2 or 3 more projects. You won't be relying on one project, no. Because you know, say that if this project bounce, I'll go to the other one. So meaning that's a contract for service, where a worker is not depending on an employee for survival. The last test is integration test. So integration test, this test seeks to establish or to identify if that worker is part and parcel of the organization, if the worker adds up to the structure of the organization. Because you'd find like an independent contractor, he's not part of the organization because he does not enjoy the benefits of the which an employee is supposed to enjoy in the company. If you're an independent contractor, one, you don't have leave days. You cannot be given leave days. Secondly, they don't contribute for you NAPSA. Thirdly, they don't contribute for you NEMA. So meaning those are the benefits of what? Of an employee. You are an independent contractor. You don't have that privilege to enjoy those benefits. Hope you are getting the difference. Hope you are getting the difference between these two contracts. Because under integration test, like I said, it seeks to establish or to identify if that worker is part and parcel of the organization, if he adds up to the structure of the organization. Because if you are falling under the contract of service, there are benefits which you have to enjoy, such as leave days, NAPSA, NEMA, all those. But when you are an independent contractor, you don't have that privilege to enjoy those. So, what's found under the first topic in employment, like I stated, we only have like you get to define what contract of employment is, the forms, types, and the test. Just And one trick question which you have to know, preferably if you are being taught by Mr. Mwale, you have to know the test used. And the other name, like I said, the other name for contract of employment is contract of service. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching this video. In case you feel like you missed out, feel free to watch the video again. Thank you very much.